Good afternoon, guys. Yeah, this is something that I've been looking into for well over a year. I questioned the mayor. I questioned several members of his administration, asking why the city's diversity background is one way and the city's leadership doesn't always reflect that. Well, the interesting thing about this story is I set out to do a very different story. I wanted to talk to the fire chief, Brian Schaefer, newly appointed as the permanent fire chief. I wanted to talk to him about trying to get more minorities in the ranks of the Spokane Fire Department, because in my previous investigation, city leaders told me the fire industry in general has very low numbers of women and racial minorities, period, whether it's in leadership or anywhere else. But when I started talking to Chief Schaefer, our conversation took a very different turn. So I followed his lead, and it quickly became apparent the chief's goal of increasing diversity is not just about numbers.
I'm humbled and really proud to lead this organization and serve as the city's fire chief.
To say that Brian Schaefer was born for this job really isn't too much of a stretch.
I mean, I've been trying to develop myself and work on my career for the past 28 years.
His dad was a proud firefighter in Illinois, and over the years it became clear Brian would follow the family tradition.
Hello, I'm Assistant Chief Brian Schaefer.
He joined the Spokane Fire Department 12 years ago, a department that also followed tradition.
The focus on excellence, which is still a good value to have, but it's really hard to define.
Now, just 3 months in as the official new fire chief, Schaefer is leading his department into brand new territory.
Our role has significantly changed, more towards enhancing people's lives, preventing harm, and then responding to those emergency incidents and saving lives. It was an all-white male workforce, and it's not that way anymore. We're open to everyone.
And that means everyone. Just a few months ago, Schaefer was heavily criticized for posting this controversial sign on the front door of every fire station in the city.
Not everyone liked it when you did that.
No, and I don't expect them to. You know, that's the beautiful thing about the United States. We can certainly have different beliefs, but at the end of the day, you know, it can't be something that you just don't talk about. You know, it's not a checkbox, it's not a policy, it's a culture. And to change that culture, it starts at the top.
And that top-down approach has already started to trickle.
Like, he's made some really overt steps, and you know, as the chief now, he can do that.
Maeve Griffith has been a part of the Spokane Fire Department for 18 years. But for most of her career, she went by John and harbored a big secret from fellow firefighters.
It's like having the worst thing that you'd want somebody to know about you, and having that kind of in the back of your head all the time.
It stayed that way for decades, as a pilot in the Air Force, as a husband, and as a father. She told her wife a few years into their marriage, then their children just last year. But very few people knew beyond that tight-knit circle.
And the fire department is a pretty gossipy place. So even though you swore people to secrecy, you knew it was just going to be, the fuse was lit.
What was it like going to work and carrying that secret?
Well, I always stayed really busy, and there was always promotions to study for. When my wife asked me to tell our boys, then it kind of brought it up to the forefront, and then I had to deal with it.
The first step was to reveal the truth to Chief Brian Schaefer.
I told him the news, and he was really accepting and really cool about it.
What do you mean by that? What was his reaction?
Oh, well, I have kind of a reputation of being a prankster at work.
Okay.
He, I think, was a little bit wary, thinking I was pulling his leg.
Once he realized, though, that you were serious,
Yeah.
what was it like then to know that he knew?
It felt good.
Then, with the help of the city's HR department, Maeve wrote an email telling the world, her world, of fellow firefighters.
My wife actually pushed the send button on the phone to all the stations. You can almost see the mushroom clouds probably pop up at each station.
But Maeve tells me she hardly had time to feel afraid when those same fellow firefighters got a second email, straight from the chief.
He could have just talked about what the letter of the law was, but he also talked about it from, you know, a welcoming viewpoint, and that, you know, I'm still the same person.
The same person, but with a whole new purpose.
I really was pretty easygoing originally in the letter, like, you can call me whatever you want, you can use whatever pronouns you want, I don't care. But then they said, well, you know, you're actually setting a precedent for people who are coming after you. So you have to be really a little bit more demanding on what you want.
Had you thought about that? Paving the way for others?
Really, I didn't see the effect that there are people who are gay on our job now who've contacted me and said that it's really helped them to be able to tell people about who they are. And that was, I didn't see that coming.
Now she hopes to keep on paving as the newest captain of Spokane Station 3.
Part of coming out too is that we're a diverse community, right? And the fire department should be reflective of that community, to some degree, for sure. And really right now it's not, but it's moving that way.
For Chief Schaefer, it's part of a much larger goal, not just to include the transgender community, but everyone.
The best thing that we can do for our organization, instead of surrounding ourselves with likeness, is to embrace diversity and purposefully recruit and bring people in that have different perspectives.
Part of recruiting is going out and actively seeking out people, but it's also being an organization that people want to come and work for who might seek you out. So how do you marry both of those to increase diversity on your workforce?
Well, you really have to make it a priority, but it does start here. So I've made the statement multiple times, we won't accept any intolerance at all.
For Maeve, it's exactly the kind of new direction that before she'd barely even dared to hope for.
What does it mean to you that your new chief, Brian Schaefer, is making these very deliberate steps? Not baby steps, but noticeable steps.
Well, I think he is willing to change a culture that's really on the cusp of change anyways. He's really looking at things that we used to do that were traditions that were just stupid to keep doing. And I think he's really he's willing to say things are stupid and we shouldn't do it.
And in many ways, all those old ways of doing things led both of them to right here, right now, where tradition is changing.
So when you hear Maeve speak, it's obvious she's very comfortable with her situation.
Absolutely.
And comfortable with telling her story, but there are probably people out there that are not so comfortable with that.
Absolutely. There are lots of people probably who just finished watching that story who wonder why we're even doing this story in the first place. Why are we bringing out gender or skin color and all of those things? And as Chief Schaefer made a very good point of saying, is that there have been steps along the way, oftentimes years prior, that keep these minority groups held back. And he's wanting to just throw open the curtains and shed light on this and say, this may happen elsewhere, this may have happened in the past, we're not doing that anymore.
And it's interesting how she kind of had an aha moment when other people said, wait, you're setting a precedence here, so it does matter what we call you and what pronouns we use.
Exactly, and she, wanted to kind of be that defender for other people who might be in a situation who aren't ready or maybe want to be ready. And she is realizing, I don't think she intended for it to be this way, but she's realizing that they are following in her footsteps. So it was a pretty incredible conversation with both of them, for sure.
For sure.
Well, we thank them for sharing that story.
Absolutely.
For sure, Whitney.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Hang